It's great to welcome back to the program today Marc Elias, voting rights attorney, founder of Democracy Docket, the leading digital news platform dedicated to info, analysis, and opinion about voting rights and elections in the courts, which we will talk about. You know, Marc, we talked on the show about this great piece you wrote somewhere between a couple weeks and 5 years ago. I mean, I'm losing track of time, but after the election, of course, about the difference between the resistance of Trump term one and the need for an opposition in Trump term two. One of the things folks have been writing to me about, which I wanted to pose to you, is do you think to a degree, resistance, opposition, whatever, right? We figure it out. But to a degree, a lot of the opposition is going to really be predicated on the things Trump's going to screw up more so than anything we do? Or like, where is the balance, I guess, between our organization and the inevitable screw ups of Trump?
Yeah, so I think there is some truth to that, but only some truth. There's no question that in the electoral space, one of the reasons why you oftentimes see the out party do better in the midterm elections is for precisely that reason, right? Which is that setting aside Donald Trump, setting aside Joe Biden, setting aside Barack Obama, whoever it is, that you tend to see that the faults of the incumbent administration get revisited in the next set of elections. And certainly Donald Trump is capable of being worse than most presidents. And therefore some of what you may see in terms of an opposition or opposition success will be the function of Donald Trump screwing up or going overboard. However, that said, part of what I was writing about the need for a new opposition has to do with the need for structure, institutions, and a timeline. And so, the fact is that the Democratic Party, the left, has underinvested in those more permanent institutions. I've been a big fan of yours, a big fan of others in the left of center space on YouTube, because part of what you are building is a permanent infrastructure for there to be an opposition. You may or may not consider yourself part of it, but it is a space in which people who are part of it can come and get their message out. And that is irrespective of whether Donald Trump is successful or unsuccessful. I've
Right.
talked about the need to develop policies that are not just oppositional policies to Donald Trump in the moment, but are sort of big tent policies that can help rebuild a winning coalition around elections that are not dependent just on Donald Trump or some politician failing in the moment. So sure, you have to take advantage of the moments that are offered to you, and I think Donald Trump will offer them. But there are other things that we have to do that are more structural and more long-term that don't depend on one election cycle or one failure of one president.
Does the left opposition need a leader? And the context of the question is, at a sort of structural level, my experience has been that the left, number one, we don't really idolize our elected officials in the way that the right sometimes does. Like I supported Bernie in his primaries and then he lost, and then I supported whoever was the best match for my views, but I don't have any bumper stickers. I don't have any flags. I don't, I support and I vote and I talk, but we don't idolize in the same way. And so sometimes it seems like there's a natural antipathy to a leader of whatever movement this is going to be.
Yeah, I don't think that you need a leader to have an opposition. I mean, I think if you look at the way in which many political systems around the country work, I'm sorry, if you look at the way many political systems around the world work, I should say,
Yep.
you don't see just personality-driven oppositions. You oftentimes see programmatic oppositions or coalitional oppositions. So, and I'm arguing, frankly, in some respect, for a coalitional opposition, which is why I talk about a big tent. There should be room for Bernie Sanders. There should be room for AOC. There should also be room for people who are more centrist, but who are committed to the fundamental values of liberal democracy on the left. So I don't think it has to be one leader. In fact, I think that that actually oftentimes makes opposition movements quite brittle. Because when that leader falls in or out of favor, then the movement fails. I think, you could argue honestly that, and I'm going to get myself in some trouble here, that the Dean coalition was more brittle than the Sanders coalition, because the Dean coalition in 2004 in the primary really did feel, and I was working, I should be clear, for John Kerry, did very much feel like it was around a couple of people, whereas the Sanders coalition actually, and I worked, again, full disclosure, for Hillary Clinton, the Sanders coalition actually was a coalition. There were it was, sure, he was a very important figure, he was the candidate, but there were lots of other people building it up and around it, that it could be part of something larger. So I do think that there is some virtue in not having a single leader.
What are some of the strategies that would distinguish the opposition, the robust opposition you want to see, from maybe the resistance of Trump term one, like in really practical terms?
Yeah. So this is a place where, honestly, I've always thought that Sanders was a better oppositional leader than a resistance leader. I'm not sure that the people who followed him would agree with me entirely. But because, and Bernie Sanders is, by the way, a college professor of mine, so I've known him a very long time. And he is fundamentally, he has a programmatic approach to this. Whether people agree with it or not, he has a very clear set of policies that he thinks animates it. And I think that one of the things we need to do on the left is not necessarily agree on what the policies are, but frankly, we need to commit that we are going to look at the policies that have worked and extend them. We're going to look at the policies that haven't worked, and we're going to revise them. It is not the case that everything we thought was the solution in 1990 or in 2010 or even in 2020 is still the right solution today. And so I think that, we cannot be intellectually lazy and just fall back to slogans. We cannot be intellectually lazy and just say, okay, the thing that we were advocating for in 2008 or 2016 is the same thing we need to advocate for today. Challenges change, and oppositions, when they're successful, are dynamic. They are dynamic in that they incubate ideas, they surface those ideas, but they are also willing to shed ideas that have not worked. And so that's one of the things I'd like to see. The second is, I think the biggest thing that I feel urgency around right now is independent media. It's one of the reasons why I really look forward to talking to you, because the fact is there are too few places for people to get out the word if they are oppositional leaders. And the New York Times is not your friend. It is basically a puzzles and games company that is getting into cooking. And that doesn't mean that you don't have some great reporters, but it is not the place to go if you want to build an opposition. The Washington Post we have seen in utter collapse, but we see a lot of really strong, independent media outlets out there that are and influencers and people who cross genre, and that I think is as important right now to building the opposition as anything else. You would not have Trumpism if you did not have Rumble. You would not have MAGAism if you did not have Steve Bannon. You would not have the modern Republican Party if you did not have the Daily Wire and Breitbart and a whole constellation of organizations and people who were able to platform and put out what I think are hateful messages and terrible messages, but serve as that. And we simply don't have that. If people think that going on Fareed Zakaria is the way to build an opposition rather than David Pakman, then you have just met the problem that we have to confront.
On the other side of the what should we do, there's like a collection of critiques that have started to become a little popular in enclaves of the left, and I want to just run a few of them by you to see if you think any of them are legitimate. They take on, again, these are not my arguments necessarily, but some of the ones that have been made. Not enough of a populist economic message as a generic criticism of the Harris campaign and Democratic candidates. Too much focus on pronouns, wokeness, and DEI. Bad on the ground strategy when it just comes to the nuts and bolts of how campaigns should be put together. Litmus tests that end up excluding people from what otherwise might be a bigger coalition on the left. Does any of this stuff ring true to you?
I mean, look, one of the things I talked about in my piece on this was that we should not have litmus tests. Like you should be able to, we I do not like the carping at that I see in some places on the in the center at AOC. I think she is an important voice in the Democratic Party. I never liked the carping we've seen against a lot of the really strong progressive politicians in the Democratic Party. They are bringing something important to the table. On the other hand, I don't think that we can say that people who have a more centrist approach to winning elections, we don't want them in the party. The fact is, what we need is a governing coalition. There will be plenty of time to hash out who gets what committee seat and whose office is bigger than whose on Capitol Hill. But unless Democrats focus on retaking power, then you're not going to have any of that. So pointing fingers within the center left and left coalition to me is not productive. The second thing that you said that I've talked a lot about that I do think is a fair critique is I think we need to put on the table whether or not our tactics are working. And in some respects, that's part of why I am so focused on independent media, because the fact is, I'm not sure that the whole debate about Joe Rogan is the right debate, right? The right debate is not why, whether Kamala Harris should or should not have gone on one podcast. In some sense, it misses the point, right? It is a larger cultural question. And I'll give you a real life example from just the other day.
Yeah.
Joe Biden decided that he was going to write an op-ed to sort of towards the end of his presidency to explain, an important points about his presidency. He placed it in the Washington Post. Now, I'm not here to attack Joe Biden, and I'm not here to dance on the grave of the Washington Post. But wherever the president of the United States posts something about his views, it's going to be picked up by the media. So why on earth would you go to the Washington Post? I mean, forget about whether you'd go to another independent media outlet. How about you just post it on the website of the White House, right? Every news outlet will cover it, or post it on social media, or post it on Medium, or post it on Substack. Just pick a neutral place. I mean, if you're not willing to go to some, place like Democracy Docket, we'd always take it, or come on David Pakman's show or his channels, and I'm sure you would take it. But why is your immediate reaction to go to the Washington Post? So I think that the tactics are not just whether door knocking is more important or less important, whether getting on, whether buying more ads on YouTube is more important than conventional television.
Yeah.
To me, that is kind of still arguing around the margins. To me, the real question is, are we reaching people where they are? And the answer is we aren't, because Democrats are too much avoiding the places where people actually go to consume content.
It's funny. I'm going to tell an anecdote now that I haven't told before because it just transpired in the last week. A couple weeks ago, I was invited to go with 9 other online content creators to meet at the White House with senior administration officials and with the president himself. And I did that. And I've talked about that. My audience knows about that. And of course, I said what I've been saying for a while, which is, listen, starting to vet independent shows in October and still saying no to most of them and doing a couple interviews, but they don't really land because they're so structured and there's so much concern. Meanwhile, Trump's hanging out for hours on all of these shows and creating this environment. This doesn't work. We need relationships. We should be having contacts with members of the House and Senate. Okay, so we do that. Last week, I get a message on Instagram from a staffer for a sitting senator. Doesn't matter what senator, I won't say, I don't want to, kind of blow up their spot. A senator that we have tried to get on the show and we've never even gotten so much as a no thanks. Just quite literally, they've never written back. And a staffer for this senator writes to me on Instagram and says, hey, we just put out this video. It's like a 1 minute, whatever. Doesn't even matter what the video is. We would love it if you would share it on behalf of the senator. And it's sort of like, we have no relationship. My audience would obviously excoriate me for just reposting this 1 minute fluff piece from a senator who's never been on the show. Like, this is not how we build an ecosystem. Just starting to, and I'm sure they launched that same request to 50 other influencers, right? It represented such a fundamental 180 from the way that the right handled independent media for this last campaign. And I'm kind of like, we need such a turnaround here, Mark. I just don't know.
Right, but it is essential if we are going to build a new opposition. And this is why I keep, presenting it in the way I do, David. As you can tell, and your audience can probably figure out, I am, a pretty institutionalist Democrat. Now, a whole bunch of people are going to no doubt give you terrible comments for having me on,
Of
right?
course.
I have represented Hillary Clinton. I have represented Barack Obama. I have represented John Kerry. I represented Kamala Harris, right? I litigated 60 cases for Joe Biden in the post-election. So,
Yep.
that's who I am. But still, I am here to say the single most important thing we can do, other than not be pointing fingers within the coalition at each other, is to build an independent media ecosystem, is because it isn't serving anyone. It's not serving people on the far left. It's not serving people in the center left. It's not serving Democrats. It's not serving progressives. It's not serving the pro-democracy community. It's not serving the pro-environmental community. It is literally starving us, while, as you say, the other side has fully embraced their terrible equivalent.
We've been speaking with Marc Elias. Check out Democracy Docket. Mark, always appreciate your insights, and a few more days, and then it indeed will be opposition time, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Me too. Anytime you'll have me, I'll be here.